It appears former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg is appealing to some Democrats, and we're taking a look at how the Democratic field would look with Bloomberg in the mix. Plus, who beats President Trump in a head-to-head matchup.
So Team Rising is here. Nyambi Carter is an assistant professor of political science at Howard University. She's also an author of American While Black. And Christy Clark is a staff writer over at The Federalist. Welcome to you both.
Ladies.
Thank you. Good
Great
morning.
to see you. We got this fascinating new poll, basically, Michael Bloomberg, how a Democratic field would look like with him in the race. Morning Consult, one of our favorite polling outfits there, basically showing him sitting around the 4% mark. Now, it's interesting, Nyambi. Crystal and I both were talking about this upon his entrance. Basically, Elizabeth Warren has lost about 2%. Kamala Harris and some of the other candidates, which garner a lot of upper middle class, kind of white liberal support. That's basically what we said, who Bloomberg's ultimate constituency is. And so he's actually not going to have that much effect on the race other than going after Elizabeth Warren, and would benefit Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden quite significantly.
Absolutely. And I think that plus or minus 2 points margin of error still says she's still there, right? So I don't know that he does much, and I don't know that he does a lot to excite the base of Democrats who've been clear that they want something different. He is much of the same old same. So I don't actually know that there's enough light between him and a Donald Trump that he's actually going to influence or turn on any Democratic voters, because folks that are in the tank for Bernie Sanders are not going to be interested in a Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah, that's one thing for sure. He's going to take exactly 0 percentage points from Bernie Sanders. That much we know for sure. And in fact, having that contrast of an actual billionaire trying to buy his way into the presidency could really help Bernie Sanders. But I wouldn't write him off so quickly. I mean, he gets 4% of the vote. It's not that impressive, but it is better than like 20 other of the candidates before he even gets in. But you cannot totally dismiss someone who has that much money to spend and who has that much elite cachet. You know, the media is going to love his candidacy. They're going to love his candidacy. And so there is a constituency of sort of like affluent white people in the Democratic Party who are looking for a centrist of the type of Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah, I really think that this solidifies to me this entire punditry of, hey, we think that the Democratic field is really weak and that primary voters particularly are a little bit more progressive than what you're going to see when you come to the general. And so people are interested in a candidate that is more moderate. And then they look at Joe Biden and they're like, well, this ain't it. So I think they are looking for that. But again, it's still too preliminary to
I think you're right.
know.
I think, Nyambi, the other thing that really annoyed me was just like the hubris of Bloomberg to try and jump into this race. What he doesn't understand actually is that, a lot of Joe Biden's constituency are working class whites, but also, older African Americans overwhelmingly with him. These people are not going to leave Joe Biden, who was the former vice president to Barack Obama, for Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City.
Well, and not just was he the former mayor of New York City, he was the stop and frisk mayor of New York City, who caused a lot of pain and heartache for a lot of black and brown people in that city. And I think what is more, he's not running in South Carolina, right? He has to win black voters if he's going to win. I don't think he has a chance with them, to be quite frank. I think he's done too much damage to himself. I mean, unfortunately, he's a 3-term mayor, so we have 12 years of history to look at and see all the things that he did wrong when he was mayor of New York City, and I don't think he'll be able to get out from under that with black voters.
It's funny, too. I saw him defending the 1994 crime bill, more recently. It's just like all of these cultural shibboleths. And then going after, he's very much, he would still defend that to this day, the 1994 crime bill. I mean, his politics are so far out of the mainstream of where the primary is currently that people seem to forget, the media just seems to forget, Iowa and New Hampshire are not representative of the Democratic Party. And yet, Michael Bloomberg directly appeals to them.
Yeah, because I think that this is people right now are going to go towards a Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, even Joe Biden, because I feel like he really is somebody that you can push around if you really want to. And so I feel like right now we're looking at somebody that's more progressive and it seems very appealing right now. But when the general electorate comes in, the smart Democratic voters are going to be the ones that go, a Bernie Sanders presidency, an Elizabeth Warren presidency is not going to fly in the general. They're not going to beat Donald Trump. And if we really want to beat Donald Trump, we need somebody like a Joe Biden, like a Michael Bloomberg, I guess you could even say like a Pete Buttigieg that is somewhat moderate.
Oh my God! But here's the problem.
Though, because in the head-to-head, I mean, this isn't the head-to-head.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got the head-to-head numbers we can put up right now, but here's the problem with that analysis: is that we ran a centrist last time.
Right.
Al Gore was a centrist, John Kerry was a centrist, Hillary Clinton was a
Absolutely.
centrist, Barack Obama was a centrist, and yes, he got elected, but he also, we saw 1,000 state legislative seats lost during his presidency. We saw the House lost, we saw the Senate lost. So I don't buy this, centrism is the way. I think and I don't think voters vote that way. And that's what shows up in the head-to-heads is, it's not about ideology who's beating Donald Trump here. It's really about how voters feel about that person and how much they trust that person counts so much more from exactly where they sit on the ideological spectrum. What do you think, Niambi?
Well, I mean, I think what people say to win primaries and what people do, right, to win general elections are very different things. So I'm sure we'll probably see some of these more leftist candidates sort of moderate their message a little bit because they recognize, right, that this has to come down a little bit to, I think, draw more people in because primary voters and general election voters are not the same people necessarily. Right. However, I do think it is a moment that we're in where people actually don't want more of the same. Right. They actually do want bold leadership. They want new ideas. They do want to talk about college affordability, equal pay, all of these things that people say are too far left. People actually want that who are voting for Democrats. And I think if Democrats are going to win, they need to embrace that constituency and embrace that energy and run a 50-state strategy, for God's sake.
Yeah, and what you're getting at, Niambi, we talked about a lot about this last week, that New York Times poll, which basically showed, I mean, they only did Elizabeth Warren, but they were basically talking, Chrissy, about, they were saying that some of these Biden voters, I think it was like 3 out of 4 or something, would not back Elizabeth Warren or did not have favorable views of Elizabeth Warren. And they said it was because she was too far left. Now, what Crystal and I were basically taking a look at is it's not because of the economic populism, actually, that they look at her as too far left. It's on the cultural front. That's actually where she's most out of step with a lot of the non-college educated whites, particularly in Michigan and Pennsylvania and those types of areas. And so that is actually, I think, the needle that a lot of these candidates would need to thread. And that's why I think Bloomberg probably is showing up a little bit more in that head-to-head. But it's not because of the economic issues. He actually, if he would lose, it would be because of the economic issues and not because of the cultural. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in all of those swing states. I just left Michigan to come live in D.C. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of what people are saying around there. Democratic constituents in a swing state like Michigan, they need somebody that isn't so far left on cultural issues. They don't feel the same way as somebody like even Pete Buttigieg. I'm actually very shocked that he is so not moderate when it comes down to those cultural issues, because they're very centrist on culture issues, whereas they want to see, I mean, what was the poll that came out? 51% of people are favorable towards Medicare for all. Right. That's not a centrist issue by any stretch of the means. Right. But the cultural issues, I completely agree with.
I mean, if you look at even Green New Deal, if you look at federal jobs guarantee, if you look at $15 minimum wage, I mean, you've got right now a massive populist revolt, economic populist revolt in all these red states among teachers. Yes. So the economic piece, that's actually a plus. And like Soccer said, I think that's the part where Bloomberg could get painted. I mean, look, he's running because he's got this circle, this bubble around him that's saying all these candidates are terrible. when you look at it, actually, especially primary voters in the Democratic Party, they're happy with their choices.
Well, and I think he was terrible. I mean, let's be quite frank. I mean, his only thing is, I'm a billionaire, but you doubled down on a policy like stop and frisk, which was found to be unconstitutional. You violated people's civil rights. Most of the time, it didn't actually result in any real crime or removal of guns or drugs. You actually hurt people. So you're actually not that great. I mean, I think what he is going with is a billionaire can only beat another billionaire. And that's his qualification. And I think that's a problem. And that kind of thinking is sort of why we're in this moment.
And his tenure in New York City was great for elites.
Yes, absolutely.
Made Manhattan into a luxury good. Those are his words. Rent skyrocketing, place becoming completely unaffordable. By some metrics, that's progress. But for most people, that is not progress. That is their life becoming harder and harder to live. All right, ladies, stick with us. We got more after the break.